Welcome everybody. I'm going to start sharing my slides. I'll tell you who we are. Sorry. I'm Angela Catley. I am the development lead for Community Catalysts. Joe, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, Joe McKaylee, as you can see on the slide. I'm a Head of Service at City of York Council in the Adult Social Care and Communities Department.
Thank you, Joe. Anything else I wanted to say before I move on to anything else? I don't think there is. Let me just toggle back to everybody and yeah, I think that's I think we'll just move on. So we're going to talk a little bit today. The whole kind of background to this event is our Enterprising Communities project. It's a project that's just coming to an end now. It's been in a two-part project that has a focus on community and everything we love. So community connections, community resilience, working with passionate local people who want to make a difference within their locality. It's been delivered in partnership with 4 local authority partners, and we've got Joe here from York today. I've also got my colleague Julie in the room, I think, who has been leading some of the work in York. The other local authority partners are Warwickshire County Council, Herefordshire County Council, and Telford and Wrekin Council. And there's representatives from some or all of those authorities or the local people who've been making a difference in some of the other workshops. So different kind of representation. And if you, the second set of workshops, you may well be meeting people from some of those 4 areas. And also we know that you can come back into the whole event and listen to all the sessions are being recorded. And you can listen to them afterwards if you're interested in anything in in a specific one of those areas. Over the course of the project, we've supported something like 356 people or groups that are either running or aspiring to run a community business, a community enterprise, a community venture, to set up something or adapt something that they already run to think about social connections, loneliness, social isolation, and general well-being. The guys that we worked with have a massive range of business models. So these guys are not all VCSE, shall we call it, voluntary and community sector. You know, they choose a range of different business models. There's charities, there's trusts, there's social enterprises, and all sorts of things that you would recognise as voluntary and community sector. But there's also things that you would recognise as small businesses, sole traders, small companies, little limited companies. So a wealth of business models, and we believe passionately in the value of all of that. We know that the VCSE sector has huge impact. But we also believe that that's only a part of the community picture. And in total, as part of this project, we've connected with these 356 enterprises and ventures are connecting with, supporting, engaging, and having an impact on over 6,000 people. And that leads to huge community connection and resilience within the localities where the project has run. What did we learn? From a perspective of this workshop, which is about community resilience, I think we learned that, well, I mean, we always knew this, but we've kind of got evidence because we had Birmingham University helping us evaluate this project. We learned that communities and the people that make up communities are amazing. They are willing and able to help each other, and that's been absolutely demonstrated in spades over the COVID challenges. I mean, the other thing we've learned, we always knew, community is not really a place. You know, I've got a friend with a learning disability, and I read her care plan, person-centered plan over the weekend, and it talked about she liked spending time in the community, as if the community was a place where she stepped out of her doorstep and she was in it. Community isn't a place. We all know that, don't we? You know, community is about connections. It's about people. We know that when people help each other, the results and the impact is massive, with really big ripples. We know, we've learned that public sector bodies, and that isn't just local authorities. I think that's all public sector bodies. That's health, police and criminal justice, housing. You know, I think public sector bodies or arm's length public sector bodies can really help or hinder the effectiveness of this. And in order for public sector bodies to do that, to really invest in community resilience and community connections, they need to take a long-term vision, a long-term strategy, taking time to forge positive, collaborative partnerships, and making space for creativity, innovation, and stuff that's a bit different to the status quo. So I'm going to, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to do a poll at this point. So if you go into the top right-hand corner of your screen, you will see a poll. And you've got a little poll there that says, does your community actively invest in the strengths of local communities? I'm just interested, before Joe actually tells you how amazingly that looks in York, I'd just like to have a bit of a sense of what it looks like in other localities as well. So if you could go into that poll, and then you should get an option of a don't know, no, and yes. I'm just going to give you a couple of seconds to do the poll before I hand over to Joe. I'm going to pour some tea. Maybe I should have muted before I did that, do you think? Tess will be laughing at me. It's a flask, everybody. I'll just show you. There you go, just so that nobody thinks there's anything untoward going on. Lovely. Just a few more minutes for people to vote. We've got 38 people in the room. Oh, I better vote. There we are. So it looks like there's a big percentage of people who feel that their council does actively invest in the strength of their local communities, which is really heartening. We ran this event on Friday, and we had an even higher percentage. So I think that for me is really heartening. My instinct is if you'd done that poll a couple of years ago, you perhaps wouldn't have got, or certainly pre-COVID, you maybe wouldn't have got quite as high a positive. So that's excellent. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slides, and I'm going to hand you over to Joe, I think. So what does this look like? What does this look like in community? Can I ask? Joe's going to talk a lot about all this amazing stuff that's happening in York, and then we've got a really nice video to show. So what if you could possibly use the chat to key up any questions that you've got for Joe that we're going to ask him at the end of his presentation and video. Okay, Joe, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Before I start, I'd agree with what somebody, I think it's Kat's, just put in the chat, because communities are already very strong and resilient, aren't they? And I think local authorities need to recognise that, share power a bit more openly, and work in a way that reflects more compassion and humility, and recognising the power of connections and relationships. So reflecting what I've just said there, I mean, I'm lucky to work and live in York. It's a great city and a fantastic local authority that recognises the assets that it has, not least its very active citizenry, a fantastic voluntary and community and social enterprise sector, and a great set of partners. But like a lot of places, excuse me, we faced some quite unprecedented challenges, even pre-COVID. And I've been working in adult social care, where we sort of started this innovation journey from within the council back in 2016, where our director recognised the current model of adult social care wasn't really fit for purpose or appropriate anymore. We were often intervening in people's lives too late at a point of crisis that didn't really recognise enough the ageing population, people living longer with long-term health conditions, rising loneliness and isolation and poor mental health. So we chose to shift the model to what we call our community operating model, that focuses more on early intervention, prevention, and asset-based community development. And I have the lovely job to lead that strategically in the city. We were quite fortunate in having a number of key leaders working very collaboratively and in a generous leadership way at the same time. New chief exec, a number of new directors, new management team at York CVS that really got this and wanted to work in a different way, more openly with communities to tap into their resilience and really see them as an asset that we could connect more deliberately with some of the very complex issues we were facing in society. What we've done is, as a part of that model, try to create the conditions that will allow success to flourish and positive outcomes for people to be achieved. So we have invested in a number of proven evidence-based programs that reflect good community development practice and person-centered approaches, not least community catalysts. As Angela said, we've had 2 community catalyst programs running in York, but we've aligned to that other approaches, not least local area coordination, and we have a video on that. And local area coordination in York has really been a quite significant catalyst for change, and the stories of people changing their lives around and having a better or moving towards a good life have really acted as a ripple in the system to see how a values and principles based approach can really change things. We've brought in other things like Good Gym, a very well thought out social prescribing program, tapped into a marvelous cultural arts and creative sector, and tried to embed these approaches in our system, not see them as a nice to have them deliberately embedded in what we're trying to do. We also revisited our volunteering strategy with the CVS and partners in the city back in 2017, using an American model called Cities of Service that has been very successful, that looks at impact volunteering within our system, how you tap into volunteers and link them specifically to pressing public challenges. And we focused on health inequalities and loneliness and isolation. We've also moved towards an asset-based commissioning model. So we're naturally looking at strengths as opposed to deficits, seeing what's strong, not what's wrong in the individual. And from my perspective, supporting people to work in a different way. And COVID has been an excellent example of that, of how we've grown an even bigger group of allies as a result of the red tape and bureaucracy that has decreased during the coronavirus times. So it's quite a powerful story in York, but there are lots of other cities beginning to adopt, I would say, a more genuine asset or strength-based approach. And that's what we have tried to do. So starting with adult social care and a rethink on that model, but linking it into how ABCD can complement that, and the growth of community businesses and community enterprises as a part of that sort of system. We have a video. It did struggle to work last time, didn't it, Angela? So hopefully it'll work a bit more effectively. And this was just launched. It's officially being launched today at the Nesta People Power Shift conference. And it's an example of how ABCD and local area coordination can help councils to build more stronger and resilient communities. So very topical. So I'll hand back to Angela because she's doing her best to manage the tech, and we'll see if
it's all good fun. It's all good fun, Joe. We love it.
Yes.
I feel a bit better today than I did last time, I have to say. Right, now we're going to cross all fingers that this is going to work and the sound's going to be good. Here we go.
Denise is a community health champion in the City of York. She arranges activities with a focus on connecting people and building relationships in her community.
For me, being a health champion, it's more than just a sense of pride. It's more about me being able to get my passions out into the community, but it also gives me a sense of purpose. It makes me feel like all these fantastic people that have helped me, that's my way of giving back to them. And it's my way of creating this lovely ripple effect for future generations.
In York, local area coordinators connect with people and help them to achieve their vision of a good life, exploring options and overcoming barriers.
Being involved with the local area coordinators, and especially with Sarah, has been actually quite a powerful journey. They walk along beside you and guide you, but what they do is, and it's really clever, and I think it's quite fantastic, they'll guide you, but it's not them telling you, it's actually you. They support you. It's you that makes these decisions. It's just that they bring out that best side of you just by being there and being a friend and being supportive.
Encouraging people to build on their strengths and natural support networks develops their personal resilience and also that of the community.
Denise was introduced to me by a person at the local primary school. This lady introduced saying this person is quite new to the village. She lost a leg due to cancer, and she could really do with some support. You know, our journey is still ongoing, but Denise is just such a big part of the community that she doesn't often need my support anymore. You know, she walks down the street and people's faces light up because they know that she is like there, and, you know, she's chatting and she always makes people feel a lot better.
Strengths-based approaches put people in relationships at the heart of everything and shift power to citizens and communities.
Every area of York is slightly different, so we actually adapt to where we are, and having that freedom to develop the role and to be who we are and to really get to know the areas, it really works. We don't go around with lanyards on saying that we're from the council. We're very fortunate to be employed by the council, but we very much see ourselves like as embedded in the community. Being able to listen and take on board what that person's saying. We can make assumptions about how we think somebody's life should be, but listening to them, you can get an idea of what life they want. And that is crucial to having an asset-based approach.
Language is key to reducing inequality and creating the different kinds of relationships, which is part of the vision for York, helping the council to create a more caring, compassionate, connected society and city.
We're very big on language and how we've been reframing the narrative in discussion to reflect more strength and asset-based practice. So we always talk about the citizen, you know, the active citizen. That again reflects wanting to build on people's passions, skills, assets, their gifts, their capabilities, and to tell their own story.
Connected, caring communities of active citizens are central to people living well. Leadership that understands nurtures social action through a sense that we're all in this together. By investing in communities, local authorities can cultivate the conditions for people to flourish and, over time, reduce the dependency on formal services to resolve crisis.
A number of the people that asked to be introduced to us as a team are struggling with their mental health, loneliness and isolation. And often the solution is not in a medical model, you know, in hospital, in care. It's in the community through the power of the culture, arts, creative sectors, through the power of sport and physical activity. Dee's a great example of one of our health champions, somebody of lived experience that had fallen on very difficult and challenging times, reflecting a complex health condition, but has some amazing personal qualities. And through ourselves working with her, tapping into her potential, has been an amazing story. It's a great example of community building.
City of York Council are challenging the traditional approach to measuring outcomes and inviting people to tell their stories to make systems better.
So we were looking at a way to measure the impact of social action and decided to do something that was a lot more creative and develop the stories that we knew had such a big impact into something that would maybe have a little bit more academic rigour. So we would make them into layered stories. So start with the individual story, develop that into some accessible format. So we would have it in written format, a picture with a hard-hitting quote and a short film. And then around that, map some of the community connections and the social action and the community context. And then above that, the systemic context and the wider kind of ripple effect. And we've taken those stories to, head of housing. And one of the stories, has really been a catalyst for system change and really fed into the way that housing are restructuring their services.
Using community intelligence and experience to co-design services creates reciprocal relationships between citizens and local authorities.
I think so many systems have done really well at designing people out and designing that human contact and that human element out of processes and everything we do and evaluation, and local area coordination definitely brings that back in.
I grew up in a small village. So when I grew up, I was always told it takes a community and a village to raise a child. I think that in this ideal world that we create, if we have a lot of people together, all helping each other, all supporting each other, then, you can only grow from strength to strength, can't you? The only way you're going to get that ideal world is if the communities all band together and we all support one another.
We live in challenging times, but have seen how quickly communities can mobilise, showing natural kindness and creativity. The power of human connection and compassion in finding collective solutions is clear.
I'm hoping everybody can agree that that's a really, really amazing piece of work. What's been happening in York, but also the way it's been captured on the video by Nesta. I think it really brings together all the key nuggets. I think that are swirling around a little bit in the ether, particularly the COVID, post-COVID, Build Back Better kind of ether that fits sort of really, really strongly. And I'll tell you about this quote. The Birmingham University have been evaluating the projects that we've been running, and they produced 80-odd page reports for stage 1 and stage 2 of the project. And when I came to do this presentation, I waded through the 80-odd page report for the one that's one part of the project. And I selected this quote and stuck it on here without having any idea. It was all anonymized, so I had no idea who'd said the quote. And then I stuck it on here and showed it to Joe, and Joe tells me that it was his quote. So that was serendipity or something or other, which I think is quite amusing. So I'd like to invite people, if anybody's got any questions for Joe, particularly about what's happening in York. There's been some really strong stuff coming up on the chat, but I'm just wondering whether anybody's got any kind of specific questions or anything they want to explore with Joe about what's happening in York. I think some people might be able to speak.
Angela, I did. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Who is it?
It's Kat. Hi, I did pop a question in earlier. This is brilliant. I just love hearing anything like this. But the questions for me always come back to is, what thoughts do you have, Joe, around how we proliferate this, and what prevents other areas kind of picking up the magic in terms of the simplicity of what you're doing and what you're achieving, if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, it does. It's good. It's a good question. I think leadership is a key part of it, Kat. Like I said, we were quite fortunate that we had some key leaders arrive in the city at the same time. I think a lot of this stuff doesn't go to scale or doesn't proliferate if you don't have leadership. Collaboration is the golden thread that runs through everything that we try and do in York again. And we found through that generous leadership and collaboration being focused on, we've worked more effectively and attracted more opportunities, investment, and different ways of doing things. And working from the evidence base. I mean, I was amazed when I arrived back in York in 2016 that it didn't really have a very strong performance framework for the agenda around, strong, resilient, inclusive communities. So coming back in with a bit of a toolkit of other places have done this, let's learn from them, embed it in York, make sure it connects with politicians and communities, and the power of stories. I don't say it for the sake of it. Stories have been the most successful thing to change the culture and behaviour of the council and the city, and to work in a different way that is seeing this going to scale. But so a few things in there, but I'd say leadership, is quite key, but using the tools wisely so they connect.
Just follow. Thank you for the question, Kat, and thank you for the answer, Joe. Just following up on the answer there, a couple of people in the chat, Sally and Kate, are asking about the layered approach to evidence that Jenny spoke about in the video, Joe. So would you be able to kind of share a little bit more information about that? And Sally in particular was asking about whether that approach is something that other areas can access.
Yeah, it's really topical. We're working on it now, currently, because we felt that stories and storytelling we could push further, so it had even better reach and could inform system change a bit more deliberately. So the concept of the layered story, as Jenny is saying, is looking at a person's story at an individual, community, organisational and system level. As I say, we are currently working on that. We got a little bit of funding from DCMS, from government, as a part of their Enabling Social Action project, to look at reworking measurement frameworks and performance frameworks. And pleasingly, they've allowed us to focus on stories. So when that product is finished, we can get it shared. But we've got a concept paper that we can share with people. That's just a couple of slides, and you'd be able to pick it up from that. But there's a lot of interest in it at the moment. So again, we're currently working on that with Nesta. We've written a blog with them about it, so I can get that shared as well. But hopefully that helps. Lovely, thank you, Joe. Nick's asking about the most significant change approach, and whether you've come across that, Joe, and used that in York, and or whether anybody else in the chat has come across that and could write and let us know. And then Danny's asking about communication in York, comms, and using comms to shift culture and systems, and whether there's anything special you've been doing in York around comms, to take what you're learning and make sure it has biggest impact it can. I'll start with comms. And if you could see me, I've probably got my head in my hands, because corporate comms departments in councils can be a bit of a nightmare. Don't retweet that. But if you get them on side, they are a significant resource and ally that you can work with. I wouldn't say manipulate, but certainly work with. And our comms department, during COVID and prior to that, actually, were really beginning to get this. They've done quite a bit of work with us on storytelling. And they've run a really good campaign during COVID called Your Kind, that went viral on Twitter, and that spoke quite openly about the need for more compassion and connection and a bit of love in society. So to see that coming from a local authority, I think was really interesting, and they're wanting to build on that with us now and take it to the sort of next level around how you sort of sustain this and embed it more deliberately across the city and community. So I think if you can get past some of the normal permafrost of corporate comms departments and councils and get them to engage and take them on that journey with you, they can be a really valuable friend and resource. I'm not familiar with the other thing that Nick had mentioned. I can't even remember what it was.
Around change approach.
Yeah, most significant change approach. I'm not familiar with that, but I'm sure I'd like to hear more.
I'm just having Nick, can you unmute yourself? It looks like you can talk.
Yeah, just most significant change. It's come out of complex community development, and it's just a lovely story. It's a structured approach to gathering and exploring stories, and you gather stories at the front line. These most significant change stories, and then you have story selection panels. Those are the influencers and leaders in organisations. We've been using it in Wales, and they have to decide which is the most significant story, what they've learned from all the stories, and they produce a feedback which goes back to the people who donated their stories. So it's a lovely cycle of gathering, talking about, learning from stories, and going round and round. So yeah, I can send you some stuff, Joe. It's or you can just Google it. Most significant change. The guy who leads it is Rick Davis. He's based in Cambridge.
Yeah, sounds good. And I can see Sally's put up about People's Voice Media as well, the work they're doing, the Relationships Project. You know, I think what's really good from my perspective is a lot more people are talking about stories and how it can be used, you know, as a more recognisable asset and tool within performance frameworks, but also, more importantly, how you can get those stories shared across, you know, systems and cities and places. So.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I don't know whether it's you as well, Nick, but yeah, it was Nick. Nick said evaluation should always be focused on learning and not performance. A focus on improving and not proving. And I really like that. You know, I think that runs like a thread through kind of all of our work. Is if you can get the evaluation right, you know, where it is actually about showing what's possible and trying to get ripples with that. You know, rather than about KPIs and target numbers, you know, and sometimes you need one to have the other. But I think it's where the starting point is. I think you know is really important. Sally's talking about developing a YouTube channel. She thinks there's too much writing on websites. I think that's really helpful, Sally. Thank you. So I'm going to ask, if I can, I'm going to ask my colleague Heather. I'm hoping Heather's still in the able to talk box. Yes, it looks like she is. I'm going to ask my colleague Heather just to spend a couple of seconds talking about, we've heard what this looks like in Community for York, and I'm just wondering, Heather, have you got a minute to talk about what this looks like in community, a very, very different community? And that's why I've kind of picked Heather, because she's in rural Powys. Whether Heather's got a minute to talk about what this looks like, what community resilience and connectedness looks like in Powys, particularly kind of over COVID.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Angela. Can you hear me?
Can.
Yes. Great. Okay. So I think I'm just thinking back to what I was sharing last week, and I can tell you a little bit of a story. I live in South Powys, and during the push to get people safely out of hospital and home in Powys, I was contacted by a family to ask if they had any, if I knew of anybody who could provide some support for a 95-year-old relative who was going home from hospital, and she had refused the option of going to a care home. She said, no, what I really want to do is to go home. And so they'd respected those wishes, but people were worried about the consequences of this and not having anyone looking in on her. And I was 60 miles away, and it was way out of my project area. And I just had a thought about it, and then I remembered that once I'd met somebody who lived in the area 15 years ago, and I got hold of her phone number and I phoned her up, and through her I was able to put the family in touch with somebody who lived in the same village as this this lady and was able to take some action and check that she was okay. And I thought what was amazing about this was here I was 60 miles away and just picking up the phone, reaching out to the community in a kind of a random sort of way, how easy it was and how amazing it was that the community responded.
Thank you very much indeed, Heather. I think that's really, really interesting, because I think York's obviously York is not just the city, isn't it? But it's largely an urban environment, isn't it, Joe? And I think it's just very interesting when you take these types of approaches and think about them in a completely different setting. It still kind of works really well, and actually, rural communities tend to have a real kind of strength, don't they? I did quite a lot of work up in Scotland, in Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway and Highland, and you talk to people in villages and hamlets, and they kind of talked about, they didn't put it like this, but the way I took it was they are kind of culturally self-reliant. The council or whomever has always through eons of time, been an absent thing. It hasn't been something that's been massively present in their life, and they've always been helping each other, and because nobody else did, you know what I mean? So there's that kind of inbuilt, a different kind of resilience, I think, in rural areas to what you get in urban areas. It no better, no worse, but I do think it's kind of a slightly different beast. Would you agree, Heather?
Yes, absolutely. Excuse me. I moved to where I live from a small town, and now I'm in a community of about 100 people, and we're all well spread out. And one of the responsibilities that I've taken on is keeping the culverts clear, so that it stops the lane flooding when in wintertime when we get heavy rainfall. And so I'm out with my drain rods. And just getting on and doing it, and I think that's how things are around here. People just get on and do stuff.
Yes, yeah. I think that's absolutely right. I'm wondering whether I'm trying to create a poll at Tess at the same time as monitoring the chat. I'm wondering whether I saw that Martin's talked about Social Care Futures event, and Kat has talked about camarados and spoon rooms. I know that Kat can talk, but Tess, can you tell me, is Martin Ratledge able to talk?
Just one moment.
I can't look at the people as well as do the poll, unfortunately. Sorry?
No, Martin isn't able to speak at the moment, Angela.
Okay, apologies, Martin. I would like to have you share information about the Social Care Futures event. I know that Martin is busy organising. I think it's a 3-day event linked to Social Care Futures, which is totally and utterly with people with lived experience at the forefront of it. I know that the information about that went live last week, and I think Martin's put a link to it in the chat. So I would really urge people to have a look at that. Kat, can I ask you just to talk a little bit about Camarados, if people haven't heard of it?
Yes, I'm waving my spoon for those who can see. So Camarados is a movement that's been around for a few years, headed up by a guy called Maff Potts, who got so disillusioned with working in service world that he decided to create a movement. So the whole movement is based on the idea that all we really need is friends and purpose, but some very practical solutions to some of the issues that are faced within the public sector. So a few years back, they put teepees in hospital atriums and created what was called human hospitals. They gathered over 70,000 stories of the experience that people had in those spaces, and not just from members of the public, a lot of stories from members of the hospital workforces that engaged with those spaces. And that developed into public living rooms, which were spaces that people could take into their own communities and develop using the principles of Camarados, which is around no fixing. It is just about that space to get alongside, admitting that we're all a bit crap sometimes. I've got my badge on today, I had forgotten about that. And how we just get alongside one another, and how we ask people to help us when they're struggling, and that being an antidote to some of the problems that they face. Spoon Rooms has gone online. Hence the Spoon. It's the online version of a public living room, and they happen on a Wednesday and a Saturday regularly. It's kind of run by the movement, but we're also working to gather stories around people's experiences of COVID in partnership with People's Voice Media, who have also popped into the chat box there. So yeah, lots, really great movement to check out, doing some really great stuff, and we'd love for more people just to come and be part of the space, really, and see what it means to them.
Thank you, Kat. And I know that in a number of projects we've been linked with. I know I was having a look at. We have a colleague called Karen who's running a project with Rochdale Council, and I've been running a really nice partnership project with people from a charity called McIntyre. And they've linked in really strongly with the Camarados and the public living rooms, and to a lesser extent with the Spoon Rooms. And I think really, really powerful stuff. And I love if you see somebody struggling, ask them to help you.
Yeah, it's great.
I think they have something like 6 key underpinning messages, and that is my absolute favourite. I think we so often say, if you see somebody struggling, offer to help them. And actually, if you see somebody struggling, ask them to help you, is so much more powerful, I think.
I think all policies should be written in the style of the Camarados picture book. So if you do nothing else, search out a copy of the Camarados picture book on their website, which gives you those principles in the most amazing format. But yeah. Thank you, Angela.
And I don't know whether they still do, but if you contact them, they send you a whole pack of stuff. And they send you, how to set up a public living room, and I'm a Camarados, and stickers and books, and just for now, they did a year ago. I don't know whether they still do, but they used to do. Get in touch with them, and if you're on social media, you're on Twitter, then Social Care Futures. I think it's at Sock Future, Martin will say. I think that's what it is. Camarados, Math Pots, Kat. What are you, Kat? Reese. Okay. So yeah, I kind of look up all of those people. There's been some absolutely stunning discussion, and thank you, Kat. Kat's put her Twitter in the chat. There's been some stunning conversations, and I apologise that not all of you have been able to actually talk. But I do think that as Joe says, the stream has very definitely reflected the richness of the conversation. Dan is sharing the Margaret Mead quote. We never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, that's all. The only thing that ever has. And I think I totally and utterly agree with that. We used to have that on our old website as a community catalyst quote. I've got one more job for you before you go. I've done you another poll. What I've tried to do, probably not very well because I've been busy juggling my balls and spinning my plates. But I've tried to do a poll of what I think are the key takeaway messages from this workshop and from the chat. So I'm hopeful that you can go into the poll and have a little vote on which of those. They're all really important, so it's only a pretend vote, really. The one that you think most stands out for you as being key. So if I could just give you have a minute or two to vote, that would be splendid. I'm picking Nick's evaluation. I shouldn't tell you what I'm picking because I really like that. So go in and vote. I think the people who are on viewers get the feed a few moments behind everybody else.
That's right.
So it might take a second. So we've got 35 people in the room, I think, and only 18 votes. So I'll just give it another minute. I'm hoping that you're all got the hang of the polls by now. So the winners appear to be need to stop fixing the problems and focus on strengths. I totally and utterly agree with that. And evaluation should focus on improving, not proving. Thank you very much, everybody. The numbers are going up. So thank you very, very much indeed, Joe and Heather, and indeed Kat and Nick for such really splendid contributions, and to everybody else for the really vibrant chat. That's been blinking splendid. So I think we now go back to the lobby. Do we, Kat? And then we have a few moments for roaming about. Tess, sorry. And then we have that wasn't you, Kat Duncan Rees. That was my colleague, Kat, who is our other tech support person who understands the platform. So I think we go back to the lobby.
That's right.
Go on, Tess.
So we go back to the lobby now, and then there's 10 minutes, so you can have a comfort break, grab a cup of coffee, and then head into your next set of workshops in about 10 minutes time at 11:30.